You have no idea who you're messing with? The words hung in the air, a sharp sting of defiance mixed with disbelief. I stood there, shocked, as David, the man I had been dating for over a year, pushed me away in front of his friends. It wasn't just a push. He kicked me. Right in front of them. And for what? Because I refused to stand by his side when he made a fool of himself? But little did David know, I wasn't just some girl off the street, waiting for him to pick me up and dust me off. No, I was about to make him regret ever crossing me. You see, David had no idea who I really was. He thought I was just an ordinary woman working at a small company. What he didn't know is that I owned the estate his family had been trying to buy for years, and I had just inherited $50 billion. Now it was my turn to play the game. It was a normal Saturday afternoon, or so it seemed. David invited me to his friend's party. I was hesitant, something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Everything started off fine, with drinks flowing and laughter echoing through the grand living room of his friend's mansion. But as the night wore on, things began to take a turn. David, ever the life of the party, started to get tipsy. His friends were laughing at jokes that didn't seem funny, and I felt uncomfortable. Then, as I excused myself to the bathroom, I overheard a conversation between David and one of his friends. "Man, you know she's just in it for the money, right? She's not even worth it. Just a trophy on your arm." That's when it hit me. He thought I was just some gold digger. The realization stung, but the seed of rage began to grow. I wasn't some plaything for him to use, and I was about to show him just how wrong he was. When I returned to the group, David was waiting, a smug grin plastered on his face. And that's when it happened. I stood there, in front of him and his friends, as he mocked me for not agreeing to go along with his stupid, selfish plans. His friends, who had all been laughing along with him earlier, now looked uncomfortable. And then, with all the force he could muster, David kicked me. The room went silent. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest, the anger building inside me. "How could you?" I whispered, feeling the hot sting of tears threaten to fall. But I didn't give in. I wouldn't let him see me break. He had made a serious mistake, and he had no idea what kind of woman he was dealing with. I turned to leave, but his friends were already gathering around, muttering apologies. It was too late. I wasn't the woman who would just stand there and take it. No, I would make them all regret the way they treated me. Have you ever had a moment when everything changed in an instant? Tell me about it in the comments. I walked out of the party, not looking back. The cool night air slapped my face, and for the first time in ages I felt alive. But as I walked, a thought flickered in my mind. David's arrogance, his dismissal of me, everything he had said about me, it all made sense now. I wasn't just another girl trying to fit into his world. I was the one with the power, the wealth, and the legacy that could wipe out everything he thought he had. It was time to turn the tables. I didn't let the incident linger. The next morning, I dressed in the most expensive outfit I owned. A simple black dress that cost more than most people's rent, but it fit my mood perfectly. Sleek, elegant, and full of power. Today I was going to take control. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd been avoiding for the past week. My lawyer. The sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor echoed through the sleek office as I walked into the building. It was early, but the place was already buzzing with activity. I had called in sick for the past week, too caught up in trying to sort my thoughts, but today things were different. Today I had to take charge. I made my way to the elevator, hitting the button for the top floor where the real business was done. My lawyer, Daniel, had already given me a heads up about the inheritance, but I hadn't yet fully grasped what it meant. Now I understood the magnitude of it all. The estate was more than just land. It was an empire, a piece of property so valuable that its acquisition would change the course of business in the region. David's family had been obsessed with buying it, and David had been pushing me to sell for months. Little did he know, I wasn't selling it to anyone, especially not to him. And the $50 billion inheritance? It was a game changer. But it wasn't about the money. Not for me anyway. It was about showing David just who he had crossed. The elevator doors opened and I walked into the luxurious office, the scent of polished wood and leather filling the air. I was greeted by Daniel, a man in his mid-40s who had worked tirelessly for my family over the years. He was punctual, professional, and most importantly loyal. He stood up from behind his desk as I entered, his brow furrowing slightly when he saw the look on my face. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "I'm fine," I replied, a cold smile on my lips. "I need you to get in touch with my accountants. We need to prepare for a meeting with the board. I have some things to address." Daniel raised an eyebrow. He knew that when I said I had something to address, it wasn't going to be a small matter. I wasn't one to make waves, but today I had every intention of shaking things up. A few hours later, I found myself sitting in the meeting room with Daniel and my financial advisors. The team was large, about a dozen people, but they all fell silent when I walked in, sensing the change in my demeanor. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Here's the deal," I began, my voice firm. "The estate is no longer for sale. And it never will be. I've decided that I'm going to use it to build something far more important. I'm going to create an empire." The room was quiet, but not for long. The questions began to come in rapid succession. Was I sure? Did I understand the complexities of managing such a vast piece of property? Didn't I know how much money I could make if I just sold it? I cut them off, my tone unyielding. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I've spent years running a company and I've learned a thing or two about power. It's not about money. It's about control. And I'm not giving up control to anyone, not even David." One of the advisors, a middle-aged man with glasses, cleared his throat. "But Miss David's family? David doesn't own me, and he certainly doesn't own this estate," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "I want you all to start preparing the papers for the estate's future. The moment this is finalized, it will no longer be a business transaction. It'll be the foundation of something much larger. I need you to start making plans for how I can use this property to build my own brand, my own legacy." There were murmurs around the table, but I didn't wait for their approval. They would fall in line or they'd be replaced. This wasn't a negotiation. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and long hours spent drafting legal documents. I was making moves in silence, but something felt off. It wasn't until I received the call that I realized just how big the storm was about to get. I was sitting in my office when Daniel called. I could hear the tension in his voice as he spoke. "You need to come to the estate. David is here. He's insisting on talking to you." I didn't respond immediately. "David? Here." My blood boiled at the thought of him, his smug face, his self-righteous attitude. The man who kicked me, humiliated me in front of his friends, and yet had the audacity to show up at my estate like he still owned the place. "Fine," I said, gripping the phone tighter than necessary. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. When I arrived at the estate, the air felt different. It was heavy with tension, and as I walked through the grand hall, I could hear David's voice echoing from the sitting room. "I know she's in here somewhere," he was saying. "I came to talk, but if she's too proud to listen." I stepped into the room without a word. David turned to face me, his eyes widening when he saw me. He wasn't expecting me to be here. He probably thought I'd cower, maybe beg for him to take me back, but that wasn't going to happen. "I thought you'd be here sooner," he sneered. I wanted to apologize. I cut him off. "Apologize? You kicked me in front of your friends and humiliated me. You don't get to apologize. Not after what you did." David's expression faltered for a moment, but then he smirked, thinking he could still manipulate the situation. "You know, I wasn't serious about all that. I just wanted to see how far you'd go for me. You're too much of a gold digger to understand what's really important." My eyes narrowed. "You still don't get it, do you, David? This wasn't about money for me. You thought I was just some woman trying to get into your world. You thought I was small. You have no idea who I am." For the first time, his smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in, my voice low and deadly. "I inherited $50 billion. And that estate you've been trying to buy? It's mine. All of it. I could have sold it to your family, but instead, I'm going to make it the foundation of my empire." David's face turned pale. His arrogance, The same arrogance that had pushed me around for so long now seemed small, insignificant. He was no longer the man with all the power. I was. David's face was a picture of disbelief. He couldn't comprehend it. He had been so sure of himself, so sure that I was nothing without him. But now I was the one holding the power. His world was about to come crashing down, and I wasn't going to make it easy for him. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, turning on my heel. "I have work to do." As I walked away, I could feel his eyes on me, but this time I didn't care. David was no longer a part of my life, not in the way he once was. He had underestimated me, and now it was my turn to show him just how wrong he was. It had been a week since I last saw David, and the silence was deafening. But I knew that silence wouldn't last forever. The day of reckoning was coming. I had been busy. The team of lawyers and financial advisors I had gathered were working around the clock, making sure every detail of my new empire was in place. The estate was being transformed from a mere piece of land into something far more powerful, a headquarters for my business ventures. It wasn't just about the estate anymore. It was about establishing my legacy, my name, and showing everyone that I wasn't just a victim of circumstance, I was in control. And as the clock ticked on, I could feel the weight of the inheritance slowly settling into my bones. I wasn't just wealthy, I was untouchable. I had the resources, the land, and the backing to make anything happen. But there was still one loose end, David. I knew he wouldn't give up that easily. He was too proud, too arrogant. And I could almost feel the storm brewing, a sense of inevitable confrontation that would soon explode. He couldn't handle the fact that I was no longer in his shadow. He had to prove to himself that he was still the one in control, still the man who could dictate the terms of everything. I was prepared for whatever came next. Came unexpectedly, a message. The words were simple: "Meet me. 3 p.m. The estate. We need to talk." At first I thought about ignoring it, but I knew that wasn't an option. David had to learn the hard way, and this was his final chance to see just how out of his depth he truly was. I arrived at the estate at precisely 3 p.m., the air thick with tension. The place was buzzing with construction workers, business teams, and designers. It was alive, a reflection of everything I had been building in the past week. But inside the large, sprawling estate, there was one man standing in the middle of the grand hallway waiting for me. David. His posture was rigid, his face a mix of frustration and determination. When he saw me, there was a brief flicker of recognition, like he was seeing me for the first time. He had underestimated me, and now he was standing in the presence of the woman he thought he could control. The woman who had just inherited a fortune that dwarfed anything he could ever imagine. "Did you think I wouldn't come?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. David didn't answer right away. He was searching my face as if trying to gauge whether I was bluffing. But I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't here to play games anymore. "I'm here because I want to make sure we're on the same page," he finally said, his voice tense. "The estate, the money, whatever it is you think you've gained, it's not enough. You can't just walk away from everything. You think you can take it all from me? You don't know how this works." I raised an eyebrow, stepping closer to him. "You don't understand, David. You never did. It wasn't about the estate or the money for me. It was about you believing you could control me. But you can't, and you never will. This is my world now. You just don't know how to deal with it." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You think you've won, don't you? That somehow you've beaten me? But I'm still the one who holds the connections. I'm still the one who can make or break you. I'll make sure you lose everything. You'll regret doing this." I couldn't help but laugh. It was hollow, like the sound of a person realizing they've lost before they even knew the game was over. "You don't get it, do you? You're not the one with the power anymore. You're not the one who gets to call the shots." David stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "You're wrong. I won't let you get away with this. You think this is over? It's just beginning." And then he did something I didn't expect. He lunged at me, grabbing my arm roughly as if trying to force me into submission. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't the same woman he had kicked and belittled in front of his friends. I was stronger now, more determined. And this time I wasn't going to back down. With one swift move, I yanked my arm out of his grasp, my eyes flashing with cold fury. "Don't ever touch me again." He stumbled back, momentarily stunned by my response. But the look in his eyes was pure rage. The confrontation had been building for days, and now that it was here, I felt an odd sense of relief. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. The truth had come to light, and it was finally time to seal my fate. David was no longer a part of my life, no longer a threat. The battle was over and I had won. But just as I thought the worst was behind me, I received another call, the call that would change everything. Daniel's voice was grave. We have a problem. It's about the estate. Someone's trying to take it from you. I froze, the blood draining from my face. Who? David's family, Daniel explained. They're working with a group of investors who have been trying to acquire the estate for years. They're planning a hostile takeover. My pulse quickened. I had underestimated David's reach. His family was powerful, and if they could mobilize the right resources, they could have the estate snatched away from me. I couldn't let that happen. But I wasn't going to play their game. I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all David's family, take what was rightfully mine. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, legal action, and frantic meetings. I made it clear to everyone involved that I wasn't backing down. The estate was mine and I was prepared to fight for it. There was no going back now. And then came the final confrontation, the last piece of the puzzle. I stood before the board, facing David's family, and for the first time I didn't feel intimidated. I had everything in place. The legal documents, the inheritance, and the support of my advisors. We've come to make a deal, David's father said, his tone smug. You'll sell us the estate, or we'll make sure your inheritance is null and void. You can't possibly maintain this empire on your own. I stood tall, my voice unwavering. You don't have the power to take anything from me. This estate is mine. And no matter what you try, you will not succeed in taking it away. David's father's face turned red with fury, but there was nothing he could do. The moment I had taken control, the moment I had stepped into my power, everything had changed. They were powerless now. The deal was sealed. David's family had no choice but to back off. The estate was mine to keep and my empire was set into motion. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had doubted me, those who had underestimated me, I realized something. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I had proven everything to myself. And as for David, he was no longer a part of my life. The man who had once tried to kick me out of his world had been left behind in the dust. But even after everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, something that hadn't been revealed yet. Was there a darker twist to this story that I had yet to uncover? One thing was certain, I had only just begun. What do you think happens next? Let me know in the comments and make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next twist.